There's been studies done on this that, people with high emotional intelligence are more likely to earn more money, are more likely to be promoted, are more likely to be looked up to in a leadership perspective. And so it can't be overlooked. It really truly is just the ability to understand people. Because I also have a phrase that I use, and it's people accept what they conclude and they resist what they're told. It's absolutely imperative, because you can go give directives all day long. It's a whole nother thing when you can understand what it is they're struggling with and then ask them thought-provoking questions to lead them to an answer that you never gave a directive for.
All right, before we get into this episode, I want you to go to the Kronos Forge on Skool. It's a community that I built. It's built around how I live, train, how I build businesses, how I survive terrible outcomes and good outcomes. The kind of people I think will be in this community you should actually want to be around. They're going to help you level up in life. Too many men are trying to do all this stuff alone. There's no accountability. You got no feedback. And if you do, it's some sort of loop, everybody commiserating together. That's exactly why I built the Kronos Forge on Skool. Inside, we're going to talk about business, health, mindset, discipline, what it means to be a man, relationships, responsibility, the reality of trying to build a successful life without destroying yourself in the process. It's free to join. It's on Skool. The link is in the show notes. Go check it out. All right, everybody, welcome back. I got today with me here, Josh Zolin on the podcast. And again, I got to say, welcome back to the Kronos Group podcast. I am your host, Jerry Brazie. Let me tell you about Josh, a little bit of him. He'll tell more about himself. Interesting. He does not seem to have come through the traditional path. And I'm really interested in this part. Started as a stuntman and ended up in the skilled trades, and by 27 years old, became CEO of a place called Windy City Equipment. So we'll talk about that. You can tell that he's been through it a little bit. He's the author of Blue is the New White, a book, and he's got his new podcast, or he's got a podcast, Everything They Don't Tell You. And he runs the BITNW Academy, helping frontline workers develop leadership, financial literacy, communication, and ownership skills most people never get taught. So let's talk to him and see what Josh has going on. Josh, appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to get started.
Let's get right to that first question, which I'm sure is the one everybody asks you, but it's the one that's the most interesting, the stuntman question. What's the background on that one?
So that was the original family business. I was doing stunts since I had the ability to walk. My grandfather was one of the pioneers in the industry. He doubled for Charles Bronson for a long time. He grew up in the Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee era, and they had martial arts studios out in California. So he ran in those circles. All of my uncles were stuntmen. My mom was a stunt woman. My dad was a stuntman. And so that was the natural path for me growing up. So ever since I could walk, I was falling down stairs, jumping off buildings. I rolled my first car before I had a driver's license. I set myself on fire for an English project.
And so how is their health today?
Actually, a good question. First time I've been asked that one. Okay. That's one of the reasons, Jerry, I got out of the business, is because I saw their health. My grandfather, he just passed away a couple of years ago at the young age of 96, I think. So, wow. long lived life there, but he's broken his back 3 or 4 times, his knees, 12, 15 times. I mean, his arms more times than he could count. And my uncle's largely the same way, limping around, and man, I got to tell you, that industry, it hurts. It teaches you quite a bit, but it hurts like hell.
Yeah, and that's interesting. In a weird way, my background, I'm child number 7 of 9, and my parents had 6 kids when they were 23 years old, and then 7 years later, I came along. And the older kids, it's not that I didn't get in trouble. I grew up in abject poverty. So the older kids kind of got in trouble first, and I like to say that I avoided the worst of it because I got to watch what they did and not do it. Because I had those years in between. So it sounds like you kind of got wind of something wasn't quite right, and this wasn't going to look good for you as you went older. And you were kind of, I don't want to say you wanted to avoid the pitfalls, but in essence, you tried to mitigate the chances. You saw there's a chance that you could get severely hurt. This could impact you in the long term.
Yeah, there were a lot of reasons. That was up there towards the top. The risk of getting hurt obviously was high on my mind. and at the time I was young, so I had to weigh that against my ego. Like, how cool was it that I was the guy that got to say I got to jump off, giant buildings and do all this neat stuff. Like, that made it really fun for me. It fed my ego. Um, but mainly, the business, there are a couple other things as well. It didn't pay great. And so when you mentioned poverty, the way I grew up, I tell people that I was in the stunt business, and they're like, oh, that's the film industry, you must have been killing it. And listen, no, I mean, I was right there with off brand cereals, and eating a leftover orange roughy that we found in the bargain bin at the grocery store for 5 days in a row. I mean, so that wasn't something I was looking forward to either. And don't get me wrong, there are stunt people out there who are very successful, but it's a long road up. And in that road, which is the third thing, is it's all who and so in order to break in properly and succeed in it, sometimes you have to pretend to be somebody that you're not. And that didn't resonate with me either.
Yeah, I love that. So you dump out of that and into the trades you go. Give us some background on what you did there.
Yeah, so the pivotal moment for me was when I was sitting in my studio apartment in Reseda, California. You know, I was skinny as hell. I was like 125 pounds or something like that, because I couldn't afford to eat at the time. I was working at a seafood restaurant, because that's the only way I could actually get food is eating the leftovers that people didn't take with them. I mean, it was crazy, right? And here I am trying to be this guy who just stares death in the face every day. And ultimately, what led me to the trades was my dad had gotten out of the stunt business several years prior to me being in it. And he was the foreman at a bakery for a long time. And then he moved out to Arizona, started a restaurant equipment repair company focused mainly on fixing fryers, ovens, stoves, that kind of thing. I had no idea that this industry ever existed. I was going to be a stuntman the rest of my life. And so it didn't interest me. But once I was able to look myself in the mirror and actually say, this isn't what I want to do, not only that, but this isn't who I want to be. I called him up and I said, Dad, I have no idea what you do for a living, but I know that there's opportunity in it, and I don't want to see you on your hands and knees your entire life turning wrenches. So let me come out and work with you, and let's see what we can do.
And was there the trades? I love that. And I love everything about the trades. And something that I really like about what you're doing is, I have a 15 years old education. I was a street kid living with hookers and heroin addicts when I was 17 years old. That's my background. And I say I've hired 10,000 employees. I've done almost, we're coming up on $500 million in revenue across a dozen businesses that I bought and sold in all the years. And I did that on a 15-year-old's education. I've never hired somebody that went to college, that I cared about where they went to college, I should say. I never cared what somebody's grades were. For me, I will take street smarts and common sense every time over education. But if you have some street smarts and common sense and you put a foundation of education on top of that or under that, as the case may be, now you got something really powerful. But education for the sake of education, I don't think is valuable, even less so today than it was. I'm 57. So when I was coming up, and I was able to do all the things that I did without an education. And a big part of that, though, is the trades. A lot of the folks that I know that have done very, very well for themselves are uneducated relative to what people view a millionaire's education might be, and have made it largely through the trades. And these are some of the most skilled people that I know. And you can tell the better they are at the trades, i.e., the more successful they've been, the bigger the company, those sorts of things, the better their ability to communicate and lead is. It's not the work that they do on the trade itself, right? I mean, everybody can install an HVAC. Some are going to be quicker than others, but that customer service that sets them apart. But the baseline for that, again, is common sense and street smarts, in my estimation being having come from that. And I know dozens of these people. So I like that part of your take. And that's what you really, really looks like you've got a lot of focus going towards. So let's move to that. Let's talk about that, because that really hit me when you were going to come on the show and I was looking at what you were doing. I'd like, yeah, this is a guy I got to talk to. This is right up my alley.
Yeah. So to your point, I'm not anti-education. I'm pro the right education for the right individual. Right. And there's a lot to say about that. And I gravitate back to a quote that I really like, and it's the point of knowledge is not knowledge, right? It's action.
Mhm.
And so we always hear this phrase of knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is nothing. Knowledge plus action is power. And so the order in which we do things is very, very important. And so when, one of the things I talk about in the book is somebody's ability to learn before they actually know what they want to do. What if you learn something and you spend these 4 years getting a degree and spend all this money, rack up a ton of debt, and then only to be hired somewhere where you're not going to use any of that knowledge. You did this in reverse order. Whereas if you were to, turn 18 years old, or in your case, 15 years old or 17 years old, right, and you get right into a trade, and not only are you paid to learn, but now you are trying something before you're investing into it. It's actually the reverse, right? You're generating an ROI with your education while you're being educated, and that allows you to pivot a lot sooner if it's something that you hate. And then what it does, Jerry, is it allows you to invest in the right angle at the right time. So for instance, if you're at 18 years old, you become a plumbing apprentice and you become a really great plumber, but now you want to be in management. Well, now you can go take classes, or you can go to school for leadership, management, business, whatever's going to help you in that career path. But if you find out you hate being a plumber and you go do something completely different, and now you find out you love sales, well, your training and education is going to be completely different. You're
Mhm.
going to gravitate towards something else. And I think that we're doing the youth a large disservice by completely ignoring that and pushing them directly toward however it is we define success, or the previous generations define success, which is go to college, get a good job, right? Buy the house with a white picket fence, have 2.5 kids. And there you are. There's your definition of success. Instead of asking them, well, what is it you actually want to do?
I Let me push back a little bit. I don't think push back. Let's see if
Please.
we have some agreement here or just where we disagree so the audience knows where we're both coming from. I'm not anti-education either. I think like you do that starting out with a huge debt of high five or low six or high six figures, as we hear all of these stories, is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard of, full stop, aside from maybe being a doctor or a dentist or something where you can actually go in and earn. Even then, the argument could be made that a cost benefit analysis based on that investment of time and money could be spent elsewhere with a lot less stress and a lot more money. So there could be a love of that thing, those sorts of things. I'll set that aside, though. The majority of education, in my estimation, can be had, though, without incurring all of that debt. Every time I have these conversations, it's always about the debt and the education. But you can go to an in-state school. You can get grants and things of that nature. You can work full-time while you go to school. There are ways to get educations that require work to get that education, and then you come out with your education. That's one way of doing it. I agree 100% with what you're saying, though. If you don't know what you're going to do or you want to do, why are you getting educated? But to be clear, I'm not anti-education at all. I just don't think that it needs to be done, to your point, the way that we do it today, either monetarily or as a career choice, and what direction people are going to go. Those are both, I think, good points. I don't think either one of us are anti-education. I just think the emphasis on it and the way that we go about it is completely broken.
I agree. Well, and to expand on that too, we live in a day and age where information is readily available, right? I mean, you talk about in-state schools and stuff, which is great, but I would argue that a lot of that education you can actually get on YouTube now,
100%.
or online, or in an apprenticeship, or having a mentor, or there are avenues available to us today that weren't available to us years ago, that can be equally or even more beneficial than dumping a bunch of money into college. Which, again, like, if you know what you want to do and that's what it requires, all the power to you, man. Go for it. But if you're unsure, or if there's alternate paths, or you have limited resources, there are other ways to do this rather than, accumulate a mountain of debt, which,
Yes.
by the way, student loans, as you probably know, can't even be forgiven in bankruptcy.
Right. It's criminal. And in your book, Blue is the New White, from what I saw, it looked to me, don't let me put words in your mouth, that you push back on that cultural narrative that a lot of people have accepted for decades, that success, yeah, I mean, really, let's face it, success only comes through college. I mean, certainly that's what I heard as a kid. And it seems like, I guess I was going to say, it seems like we've sold generations a bad deal. But when I was young, you could go to school. It's only since the government got involved in loans and guaranteeing loans to 18-year-old morons who have never paid something in their entire life, only since colleges start taking advantage of children to build up their administrations and build up their cathedrals and build up all of their extras, only since we started to manipulate children have we seen this thing bastardize into what it is today. So I think when I was a kid, the idea of going to college made a whole lot of sense because you could probably go for $3,000 or $4,000 a year or a semester or what it was. Today, in the last 15, 20, 25 years, that has been broken by the government. And I probably agree with you specifically, let's say, post the government getting involved, not necessarily prior to getting the government involved, because I think it's a good experience life-wise to go off and go to college, and it's something that could easily be paid for.
Yeah, and I would agree with that sentiment, definitely, because there was a day and age where college was incredibly beneficial. They over marketed what it was, right? Oversaturated what it is. And now everybody has a college degree. I think the statistic is 33% of college graduates actually get a job related to the degree
Yeah.
that they have, which speaks exactly to what you're saying. And fair to note that everything is cyclical too, right? Back in the industrial age, skilled trades existed. They were low wage jobs. They're not what their parents wanted for their kids. So when the colleges came in and started marketing how, people could use their head, not their hands, to make the same amount of living, and safety procedures weren't in place and all of this stuff, then of course all of these people gravitated towards something else. It was only then did we realize, shit, we made a mistake. Now everything's that much more expensive that we have to build with our hands. Ergo, we have to pay that much more to the people who will actually do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'd add, when I was younger back in the day, there weren't as many options in college. So there was a lot better chance you were going to be taught something you could actually use 30 years ago, rather than the garbage that they teach you now and that they spit out that has zero value, and anyone could see that coming.
Yeah, all right. Everybody that works at Starbucks, I'm sure, can agree.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good
Sorry,
point.
man.
Let's talk about Everything They Don't Tell You podcast. Give me the background on that, and what are you trying to do there?
Yeah, appreciate you asking. So that's my passion project right now. I'll start by saying it's an iteration. I've had a podcast now for the last 6, almost 7 years, and it used to go by the same title as my book, Blue is the New White, and it was an advocacy podcast for people in the blue collar skilled trades, just to give them a platform and put the spotlight on them to show the world why they love what they do. It was incredibly successful and rewarding to be able to build that network and to talk to these incredible people. Throughout the years, I've aligned it more closely with my passions, which are building business. I love to build business. I love to have deep intellectual conversations, where I hate small talk. I'm sure a lot of people say that. I'm sure you as a podcaster can probably relate to that. And so it has since morphed. The last iteration is last year into what we're calling Everything They Don't Tell You. And this comes directly from my soul, Jerry, because I am a highly driven, highly ambitious, goal-oriented performer. This is what I do. I am always striving towards something. And in the last couple of years, there was a realization that I had that no matter how big my dreams are, I'd never be able to accomplish them if I wasn't able to become the person capable of accomplishing them, right? And that extends, all the way from logistics and management and leadership and business and like understanding what it is I'm doing there, but also and all the way to who I am as a person, how I'm showing up for my family, how I'm balancing my time, what I choose to focus on, and improve and really identify what it is I need to improve in order to actually achieve this kind of stuff. So that's a long way of saying that the podcast follows that same thread, and it helps people become the person capable of achieving the success that they want to achieve.
And you're doing that through maybe exposing people to leadership and financial literacy and communicating and what ownership looks like, all in the context of leadership or owning and operating a business. Is that ultimately what you're trying to encourage people to do or educate people to do? Or is it even more broadly, like you said, I suppose, what about marriage and family and kids and life, and you kind of bringing that all together and tying those things together and showing people that it can be done and how it can be done? Is that a fair encapsulation of what you said?
So it's for the founder, entrepreneur, business owner, executive who comes home at the end of every day and wonders how and if he has anything left in the tank. We've all been there. I'm sure you've been there. You recounted how many businesses you've bought and sold and been involved with. And I've experienced this myself. It's that it addresses that feeling, right? Of am I going down the right path? Am I who I need to be for all the people in my life? And so, yes, we focus on the business aspect of it, but we go deep into personal development. I talk to a lot of coaches, therapists, doctors, right? Healthy body, healthy mind, people that have different and alternate perspectives. So one of the things that I've found is alternate perspectives can help you connect dots that you didn't know were missing. And so it's a wider range of people, but they all are or speak to high performers about psychology, health, business, and finance.
I love this. So let's get into this a little bit. I see on social media, I see these videos, and they've got a 40-something-year-old dad. He's sitting in the car outside of his house, and he's crying. The camera's on him, and there's some sappy music playing, and there'll be some scroll going talking about how he's only a wallet to the people inside, and nobody appreciates him, and nobody loves him, and all he is for what he can provide and not the man that he is. And he cleans the tears off of his eyes, and he goes in the house, and the babies come running, and he acts like everything's okay. I see this played out time and time and time again, and we'll see if we agree or disagree. Hopefully we disagree, make for a more interesting conversation possibly. But that to me is all bullshit. I don't understand any of that. I don't know where any of that comes from. I don't understand what that is. And let me just really quick tell you why. Because I look at almost, like I said, almost $500 million is an amazing number for me to even say in revenue over these a dozen businesses that I bought and sold. And in not one of them did I earn a single penny doing something I love. I love my family. I'm a street kid. If you'd have told a 28-year-old Jerry who was just having a brand new son that he'd be married 30 years later and his 2 kids would be in the military and all of them would graduate from high school and they speak Chinese because I sent them to Chinese immersion school when they were 3 years old till the 5th grade. And all of these things, to me, by itself, Josh, is success. I didn't need to earn a penny over and above doing all of those things. But I characterize it as I did everything that I did, all the risk, all the effort, all the stress, everything that I put into it, all the sacrifice was because my children were not going to have the life that I lived because I'm a caveman. And my job every morning is to get up out of bed in the morning in the back of that cave, a nice, safe cave with a fire where the family can put their back against the wall when I'm gone in case something comes through the door. And then I have to go walk through the tall grass. I got to go hunt in the forests where something might get a hold of me. I got to hit a pterodactyl over the head, and I got to drag that thing back so my family can eat. And maybe I get hurt doing that, maybe I don't, but the reality is that I am a fuller man because I fed my family at whatever the sacrifice was. The passion isn't the thing. The passion is the sacrifice, so my family survives. I have made millions of dollars. I've lost millions of dollars too, I should point out. I've lost fortunes and made fortunes because my impetus is 100% not on what I was doing, although I worked as passionately at that as I could. My impetus was to make sure that my children and my wife were taken care of and had a better family or had a better life than my wife did growing up, who grew up very poor, and that my children did relative to the life that my wife and I had. And so I push back on this narrative about men are just bags of money and all we're expected to do is provide, and who takes care of us and who says nice things about us. And I just say, my grandfather and my great grandfather stormed beaches, getting shot at from Nazis in positions up above them, farmed from morning until night, right? Ate one meal a day, raised families, and contributed to society in a way unimaginable by the people today who have $1,000 cell phones and 2 cars.
I get what you're saying. And so I want to be clear, what exactly are you calling bullshit on?
So I call bullshit on this narrative that men don't have this intestinal fortitude inside of them, that is not normal, that's not natural. I think that that's effeminate behavior. That if you're looking for success in life and business and family, that you need to not need a slap on the back, a good job, buddy, a well done, because our job is to go fight the invaders that are at the front door. And if our forefathers did it in a world that's 1,000 times more difficult than today, a lot of my success is based on that perspective I had of where the people who came here before me came, that all of those things aren't necessary. So to answer your question specifically, I never thought for a minute I wasn't going to win. And I've been in I've lost 7 figures on multiple accounts. It sucks, right? But you have to put your feet on the floor and get up the next morning and go to work and push. I can't tell you that I've ever been depressed. I pulled a 10-inch screwdriver out of my back, stuffed into me in a mugging when I was 19 years old. I broke my back when I was 19 years old. I had a 25-year opioid addiction, and I built all of the companies doing all of those things because I've had 17 procedures on my back. I mean, I have this blueprint that says this is possible because I did it. And so I get, it just frustrates me that men, I think in a lot of these videos and a lot of this context, are given free rein to behave in what I think is a feminized behavior and is unnatural to men. I get off my soapbox, and you're the guest. I'm sorry, man. I apologize.
No, you're good.
I get going.
I love having these conversations. I would ask you, right? And I would say, if you never had any of those struggles in your life, if you never had any of those experiences, and you were given most of what you have on a silver platter and grew up in a time where you didn't have to fight for what you had, how would your mindset be different?
Well, that's a great question. I belonged to a peer-to-peer group for years. And when I joined, I was 30 years old, and all the guys that were in it were, in their 40s and 50s. And so in the early years, I remember very clearly a conversation I had. I was fretting because my children had never they go to these fancy private schools, and they'd never been punched in the face. And, I've been in 100 fights in my life. It was just normal when I was a kid. And so they all looked at me. These are all very, very well-to-do people who had grown their companies, had done very well for themselves, crawled out of nothing, came from nothing. And to a man, they looked at me like I was stupid because Jerry, we'd never been in a fight. It's not a prerequisite to go through those things, to have the skills that you need, to have the work ethic that you need, the ability to put up with the stress and the sacrifice and all of those things. You don't have to go through that to achieve not only what I achieved, but also what they achieved. So I think my answer to you based on that experience is, I don't know that it would have to be much different, because that older generation, they're now in their 70s and 80s, think like that, even though they came from very, very different backgrounds than I did.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But I would say, right, I point back to that, we've all seen that cycle or that meme, right? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create bad times.
Mm-hmm.
And the generation that you're speaking to, they may not have had the same level of struggle that you have, but they had a different set of struggles than a 20, 30, or 40-year-old man has today. And so the men that you're talking about, with the videos, which bother me equally as bad for for largely the same reasons, but other reasons as well. Like, I think that, I'm not of the mindset that men don't cry. I am of the mindset of don't fucking film that shit. But
Yes.
okay, so I want to
Let
be
me
clear.
really quick. Let me interrupt you right there. And you make a very good point. And I should have started this way. And then hold that thought 1 second. I just had this conversation with my wife last night. I was on a podcast yesterday with some guys who do offsites up in the Utah mountains with 30 guys. Okay. And they talked to me about they go up there and these guys are in their late 30s and they both had children. And they go up in the mountains with these guys and they put this thing together and it sounds fantastic. And they go up there and a few of the guys get really emotional over it. And I was like, that's where dudes should go. But when you're outside your house walking into your family, you've got to be, my mother said when I was 14 years old, you got to be the rock that you're the rock that everybody crashes against. I don't know why that's your lot in life. I remember that all these years later, and I've taken that through life. So I agree with you that they certainly shouldn't film it. And I agree with you that there are very specific places your mother dies, that sort of thing. But these dudes who have anniversaries for their dog that died 3 years ago, I got a problem.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that kind of stuff. And to kind of bring this all back, that is why my show exists, because whether you or I like that or don't like that, that's the state of men today. That is, and I'm generalizing. I'm not saying all men. But to speaking to the people that you're talking about, and there are men that have carried this weight for a long time and been successful in business, but they just don't know how to balance it. It doesn't mean they're depressed. It doesn't mean that they're going to film themselves crying in their car. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that in the grand scheme of things, their purpose, their lens, their focus isn't where it needs to be. And so they're trying to figure out a way to put it on what it needs to be. And I will gravitate back to what you said. You had a very clear and fulfilling, an honorable purpose. It was your family. And I would probably say that that's, a purpose of mine too. Now I have a purpose and I have a mission, right? And my purpose is different. My purpose is my family. My mission is my business, because that's the catalyst that fuels my purpose. And so, maybe a better question for you would be, what if your family wasn't exist? How would you behave differently? Would you still strive for the same type of success that you have today? And who would it be for and why?
Now, that is a fantastic question. And I think, Josh, you and I are on the same page when it comes to this, because my tip to success at the end of all of these podcasts, I just did a thing with a bunch of college kids out of England, out of London, England, and they were trying to decide where to go into business and financially what to do, and reached out to me, and we did this. There was 8 of us on the call. And they asked me what's the tip to success? If I could go back, what would I do differently and what should they do? And I said, go have children. That's my tip to success. Go have children.
Yeah.
Because my son was born at 28 years old. And I promise you that I would not be sitting here in front of you having this conversation, having achieved any of the things that I've achieved, had I not had my son. When my son was born, I was half a man. I think every man is a half a man. I don't mean that as a pejorative. I just mean that you're half a man. And when my son was born, and then my daughter 2 years later, and my second son 2 years later, I should have had 6. I only had 3. It's the biggest mistake my wife and I made. When my son was born, that purpose, all of a sudden, living for someone else rather than living selfishly for myself. Again, not a pejorative. I'm not saying that negatively. I'm saying that everyone lives for yourself when you only have yourself to live for. But it is so restraining that when my son was born, now I was living for someone else. And you can't get a dog, and you can't get your mother, and you can't get a girlfriend, and you can't get your nephew and nieces. That doesn't count. It's not the same thing. And you know this is if you have a family. When my son was born, it changed my life. And all I could think about is I have to go out and murder the world. He will not have the life I had. He will have a better life. And so that was my why right there. All of a sudden, I went from living for myself to living for my son, and then ultimately for my family in total. And that was a superpower. When I embraced that, when I realized that, and I didn't really realize this till about 10 years later, that what they gave me, the energy and the power that they gave me, and the wherewithal and the mental faculties of the aggressiveness, right? The ability to listen, shut up and listen. All of those things fueled everything that I am today. So I agree with you 100%. I would not be sitting here in front of you. I know this absolutely, had my son not been born.
Think about when my daughter was born, my first daughter. I have 2 daughters. Well, I think about when my first daughter was born, and I was well into business. I was doing okay. and I was succeeding, to a point. I was providing. But as soon as I held that kid in my arms, it was different. There everything was different. And you were very articulate with, the hunger and the drive and the experience I had was more of an, uh-oh, what the hell have I been doing? Right. So it was a reflection of, not what I need to do. That came later, but of what was I currently doing. And now it was like full stop. It was okay, I need to just slow down and figure out how to best position myself to take care of my family. And so that was an eye-opening, event for me. I often tell people that there are three things in life that cause you to truly change belief or perspective. And now after having this conversation, I'm going to change it to four. But let me explain. And this is one of the reasons my podcast exists, right? Is don't wait for these things. And it's usually death, disease, or divorce. Those three things will change you fundamentally. They will pull the veil back from your eyes and allow you to see things for what they are. And it is a terrible, excruciating experience. And if you've experienced any one of those three, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But there is a fourth now after having this conversation, and it's birth, right? So death, disease, divorce, and birth, because birth has the exact same effect, or at least it did for me, but it was more of in a positive sense, but these are the catalysts that usually get people to look themselves in the mirror and say, I've been doing it all wrong, or I need to do this differently, or I'm not in alignment with who I am or who I want to be. It sucks, Jerry, because what are we waiting for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, And so that's the whole reason why I wanted to build this platform, so people could turn to it and say, well, I don't have to wait until something catastrophic happens in my life. I don't have to wait until I have a kid. Maybe I'll learn this shit before that kid comes into the world, so I don't screw up half of it, right? And as a parent of three, even, I'm sure, like, you learned a lot more on the first one than you did on the third one,
Sure.
right? And so it's just, I don't know. I'm rambling now, but it puts into perspective, what we're capable of, but without having to wait for that detrimental trigger.
I don't know that anyone, no, I'm going to change that. I know that you can't be taught the influence and the power and the mind change that comes from having a kid, though. So I agree with you on the education. It's not possible. So these people who say, well, I have a dog and I get to travel to the south of France every year and you're stuck with your kids. And I'm like, I'm so much richer than you. You have no idea. The poorest man in the world with children is richer than Elon Musk without children. And there's no way to know that. You can fight back on that all you want. But I always say, I was laying in a hospital bed dying at 310 pounds in November 21st of 2021. And I had 100 mini heart attacks every day. I have this 40% block on my left ventricle. I was born with it, popped up out of nowhere, sat in my DNA. Long story short, I got fat. I was taking 19 meds a day. Again, 200 milligrams of opioids every day. And I was like, I ain't going out like this, man. I did all of these things. I crawled out of the gutter. I'm not going like this. And in that hospital, I said, I'm going to make a change. January 1st, I started eating 1,800 calories, all carnivore diet. I lost 100 pounds in 8.5 months. At 57, I put on 30 pounds of muscle. I'm in the best shape of my life. I did that because I went and found somebody who had been fat and then got healthy and looks and sounds and speaks and talks like I wanted to when I was 310 pounds and dying. So he had been there. He hadn't been fit his entire life. He had been healthy, and then he had gotten fat, and then he changed his life years ago. So he had a perspective on what I was going through. And so I say to people, business, life, health, if you want to know how to be married for 30 years successfully and what goes into that, go find someone who's been married for 30 years and talk to them. If you want to be an entrepreneur successfully, go find someone who is where you are or has been where you want to go and talk to them. That's important. You can learn these lessons in life, I think, on all of those topics, and you would be wise to do it. And I think that's what you're talking about, by going and having conversations with people who have come before you and have the knowledge that you don't have, or the wherewithal and the experience that you can rely on. That ends, though, I think, at having children. There is no way for me to accurately reflect, as emotional as I get about it, as angry as I will preach it, right? There's no way for me to convey to anyone who doesn't have children the impact of what having kids has. And I am I always like to say, I am poor white street trash by every emphasis of that word, every definition, I should say, of that word, emphasis added on poor white trash. And my son was born at 28, and it 180 degrees changed the direction of my life. There is nothing else in the world that can, it's not a pill I can give you. I think that you can understand the power, the mind opening, the experience that gives you. To your point, that you can do things unimaginable to you. I always say, Josh, and then I'll shut up. If I put a gun to your, somehow, Jerry, I can't go to the gym every day. We'll use a certain one. I said, okay, if I put a gun to your mother's head, and if you don't go to the gym in the morning and you don't work out for an hour, I'm going to pull the trigger. You're going to go to the gym. You're going to go to the gym every day. So you telling me you can't go to the gym is not true. That's your mind telling you you can't go to the gym. Go do whatever thing it is that you should go do. Get an education, whatever. If I put a gun to your mom's head, you're going to go do it. So the ability to do all of these things is within all of us. I just think the key to the biggest benefit and the largest superpower is having children. And that one you have to experience. I can't put a gun to your mother's head to teach you that. Hey, everybody, quick break. I want to tell you about something I'm doing for the first time. I'm putting together the first Kronos group cohort. That's 10 business owners max. And understand, this is not a course. It's a peer-level work with other operators and direct access to me on a month-to-month basis. We're going to go deep on what actually moves the needle for businesses, like systems and sales and leadership and staying sane while you're building something real, fitness, health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. This group is for you. The people who get in on this first cohort get founder pricing, and that's the trade for going first. And it won't be open long, and it's not going to stay at this price for sure. If you've been listening to this show or me and thinking you need a room like this, you probably do. 10 spots, founder special. Check it out. The link's in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll say two things on this. Number one is, you're right. There are certain things in life that are just experiential, and you cannot trade that. And having kids is definitely one of them. I would say that there is preparation for the experiences, right? There are things that you can learn in order to make sure that when you have that experience, that you can actually internalize and accept it rather than reject it and ignore it and just completely miss it, which I'll say 95% of people miss most experiences that they can have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they aren't trained to see it. It's like when you're going to buy a new car, and maybe it's a blue Ford Raptor, and now all of a sudden you see blue Ford Raptors everywhere.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing, top of mind. The second thing is speaking to what we're capable of, and I love that you brought that up. Do you know about the rat experiment? Have you heard about that?
No, tell me about it. Well, maybe I have. I'm not sure.
So it speaks to belief, right? And it speaks to what we think we're capable of and in what capacity. So there was this guy, he did a study on rats. It was like in the 1950s or something, I think. I'm going to butcher this, so just be forewarned. He dropped a rat in a bucket, essentially, just to see how long the rat could swim, just a standard rat. Rat swam for about 15 minutes and gave up and drowned. Okay, and so he wanted to see what the rat would do if it believed that there was a chance that it could be saved. So he did the experiment. He dropped the rat in the bucket, but right before the rat drowned, he would pick it up, and he would save it, dry it off, put it back in. Did this a couple of times. The rat swam longer than 15 minutes when it believed that there was essentially a light at the end of the tunnel, that there was something that could be done. Do you know how long that rat swam for after this experiment?
I do know this story, but yes, tell us.
Yeah, so most people say, oh, well, it was probably an hour. It was like four times as long. No, it was 60 hours. It was 2.5 days. Yeah. And the only thing that changed, the rat didn't work out. The rat didn't go to the gym. The rat did not get stronger in order to swim longer. All it did was believe that if it swam longer, it was going to survive. And so that's just another lens for people to look through when I say that you have to be prepared to have experiences, right? You have to train yourself to understand and to believe that having a kid is going to change your life, right? But without that narrative, sometimes it can be missed. As shitty as that sounds, dude, like there are people out there which I would probably qualify as horrible people, right? That they have kids and it means fucking nothing.
Right.
And I can't tell you where I classify those people in the rankings of society, but it makes you wonder, is it innate, or is it something that at a young age, if they were prepared to see the world in a different way, they would value that experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And in particular, again, we're generalizing, but if you're asking me how you want to improve your life or get better, and you're 22 years old and you're coming to a village elder like you or me, this is my advice on how to do that. I'm not talking to the white trash POS that's having kids and then ignores them, or the Wall Street guy that, you know, makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and knocks up some girlfriend on the weekend that he just doesn't care about. I'm not talking to those people anyway, right? That's not who we want to talk to. The interesting thing about that rat experiment on that one in particular too is they not only picked it up out of the water, they wrapped it in a towel and they moved it around and they talked to it. They whispered in its ear. And they were very nice to it. Yeah, it's really interesting, that thing. And then put it back in there. And that mouse was like, or that rat was like, I want more of that, man. And I'll just go forever if I'm going to get more of that. The thing I like about the blue collar approach to industry, you know, and your communication, there was a word in doing my research on you that you used that I think is something that could be talked more about, and that is emotional intelligence. I think that emotional intelligence is, again, a superpower. I always say, you know, one of my superpowers is I have no emotion. So I'm not emotional about, there's no money in emotion. And back to my mother saying that I'm the rock, that I would be the rock that everybody would crash against. She's absolutely true, because I don't commiserate. I don't have to get into it. And as a manager of over 10,000 people over my almost 30 years in business, my one message is always to a manager, to an owner: get people to do what you want them to do. Let them think it's their idea. No ego, right? Let them have all of the praise. You gave them the idea. You put out the blueprints. It does not matter. As long as you're getting what you want done, let them have all the praise. Now, I think that takes a big ego, not a small one. A small ego can be hurt. A big ego with humility, I think, is very powerful. But the emotional intelligence, in particular for blue collar workers, is not something that we get exposed to a lot. And so I gravitated towards that when I saw that and thought I would give you an opportunity to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, we've got to be very careful with the verbiage we use in the blue collar space, right? You know, because they hear a term like emotional intelligence and then immediately shut down. Why? Because a lot of them lack emotional intelligence, and it's not by any fault of their own, but it is an incredible skill. I actually do talks on this regularly about the power of emotional intelligence and the role that it plays in success. There's been studies done on this that, you know, people with high emotional intelligence are more likely to earn more money, are more likely to be promoted, are more likely to be looked up to in a leadership perspective. And so it can't be overlooked. And it doesn't have to be this, you know, sappy bullshit. You know, it really truly is just the ability to understand people. Because at the end of the day, who wants to work with somebody who doesn't get people? And to your point, I also have a phrase that I use, and it's people accept what they conclude and they resist what they're told. And so in the spirit of emotional intelligence, asking the right question, right, as a leader with that high ego and giving that praise is imperative. It's absolutely imperative, because you can go give directives all day long like you're, you know, one of the 300 and tell people to march off of a cliff for you.
Right.
But it's a whole nother thing when you can understand what it is they're struggling with and then ask them thought-provoking questions to lead them to an answer that you never gave a directive for. If you can successfully do that, not only will they thank you 1,000 times, you have something to praise them for that they actually did, and then they solve their own damn problem so they don't come to you again and again and again. And the root of this is exactly what you said. It's the emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's not something that we're taught, and I think for anybody listening, particularly in the trades, I have a nephew that's just gone into HVAC, and he's got on at one of the biggest places here in Nashville, and he's learning his way up. And this is what he wants to do. Ultimately, he's got a plan. He's going to stick to it for 5 years, and then he's going to go start his own company. So he's got it all drawn out. And one of the things that I tell him is that, and he's young, he's a good looking kid. He can talk. He looks you in the eye. He's a good Southern boy. I know a lot of tradesmen who have the personality of a rat. I mean, they just cannot communicate.
Yeah.
They have zero EQ, right? I can hardly stand to be around them, and they do very, very well. So, in that environment, if you can learn to talk and deal with other people, these guys, and they just go through people left and right, and nobody will stay working for them. And yet, in spite of themselves, they're still successful. And I always think to myself, how much more successful would you be if you just got out of your own way, if you weren't the focal point of everything that you're doing, if it didn't have to be all about you? And so I think the emotional intelligence, and why I wanted to bring it up, is a big, big tool that is an impediment, or excuse me, a big tool that is not used, or an impediment that is placed in front of so many tradesmen operators. Really anybody, though. This goes across the board because everybody could work on this. But we're talking about tradesmen in particular, that would only add to their business if they could just get out of their own way and learn the tricks that come from a high EQ.
Yeah. And that's honestly, that's the entire reason why I started the Academy. It's sold as an employee development tool for blue collar business owners to deploy to their front lines. And this is exactly the type of stuff that we teach. It's the communication, the leadership, the initiative, the emotional intelligence, all of this kind of stuff. Because here's the narrative. Right, we talked about college earlier on the show, but most of the blue collar workers that are in the business today are in the business because somebody at some point told them that they were not smart enough to go to college.
Yeah.
And right, and what this created was an identity in themselves that they're worthless, or that they can't do this stuff, or that they don't have this emotional intelligence, or it can't be learned, or all this kind of stuff. And then in turn, nobody invested into them. Not until they were being considered for a leadership or management position, which coincidentally, right, ironically, we don't usually consider those people unless they have emotional intelligence.
Right.
So it's this cycle that we see specifically in the blue collar skilled trades. I'm sure it exists in other industries as well. But that lack of emotional intelligence holds people back from their true capability.
Yeah, like being a stock trader is somehow harder than going to work every day and figuring out what the problem is with the plumbing 10 feet underneath of a house, for God's sake.
Right.
It's a bastardization of reality by social media and culture. And this lends it to my last question for you. Working with all of those younger guys, this is a great segue. What do you think young men specifically are starving for right now that they're not getting from modern culture?
That's a good question.
I'll give you my answer while you think about it.
Sure.
You think about it. I think that young men, and I've been talking to a lot of young men, I talk to them constantly. I think that they're starving for permission to be men, to think like men, to operate like men, to react like men, to push back against commercials that show them at 40 years old crying in their car before they go in the house, right? They want to be told it's okay to open a door for a girl, that it's okay to go on a date. It's okay to want to be a father, to have children. It's okay to want to have a career. It's okay to not go do the things that society tells us to do. I think they're starving to let them be innately who they are, and the culture pushes back on them. It's a little bit broader, I think, but I think to try to generalize that is young men are looking for permission to be what they want, or to be who they are, rather than what again, our overly feminized culture we have today is telling them that they should be.
I'll take it a step further than that. I think they're looking for a reason to not have to ask for permission. I think that is because I think you're right. I think that they are looking for permission. But the bigger game there is, why do they need it? So maybe what they think they're after is that permission, but what they actually need is to act without it.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I wouldn't disagree with that. Unfortunately, we've raised now generations of kids who are used to doing what they're told.
Yeah,
Right.
well, of
Yeah.
course. I mean, I thank
Yeah.
you
As
for
a
the
Gen
school
Xer,
systems on that.
as a Gen Xer, what you said really resonates, right?
Yeah.
We never listened to anything anybody ever told us. So,
Sure.
yeah,
That makes sense.
I'm with you 100%. All right. Quick speed round as we go out here. I like to do this at the end. Just give me a quick 1, 2, 3 words, just as short as you can, right off the top of your head. We'll do 4 or 5 of these. Most overrated business advice.
The harder you work, the more you make.
Hardest part about leading people that you used to work beside.
Perception of who you're going to be.
Yeah, good. One trait every great technician eventually needs to become a leader.
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, perfect. What's something blue collar businesses do better than corporate America?
Truth.
Last one. What's one truth? I like that. Yeah, that's reality will have a corporate lets you hide a whole lot of stuff. Yeah, that's a good point. What's one lesson life hit you with that nobody could have taught you ahead of time?
If you understand the game, you can't lose.
Yeah, understand what you're playing. I like that. Everybody, Josh has got a book, Blue is the New White, but let's go listen to his Everything They Don't Tell You podcast and also his BITNW Academy. Josh, how do people get a hold of you?
I'll make it real easy. It's joshzolin.com, JOSHZOLIN.com.
Guys, go check him out. My man knows what he's talking about. Josh, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, man, I start these things with a couple of questions. We got to one of them. So,
well, thank you, Jerry.
That means the hour went quick typically, but I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Bye-bye.